Does the stock market matter? Yes, but according to age and race. Thus far in 2020, a Gallup poll found that 55% of Americans say they own stock. Now, this is down from 62% in 2008. That was when the market crashed, and we still haven't fully rebounded. Millennials say they don't like the stock market. They prefer real estate, which is the second most popular form of investment. Third would be gold, CDs, followed by Bitcoin. It's also worth noting that there are disparities amongst race. Only 33.5% of Black households say that they own stock. So does it matter? Yes, but it matters on how old you are and what race you are. Very interesting.
I mean, whether or not the stock market matters to regular Americans, I think is worth talking about what regular Americans means. I mean, Erin was great and very right to point out that there is a disparity. For the 72% of middle or low income earners who may be more disproportionately affected during our current crisis, I don't know. There's a clear dissonance between the stock market and the economy. If you look at May of this year, of 2020, for instance, the S&P was the same as it was in October of 2019, whereas, of course, we saw unemployment at an all-time high. Less than half of young Americans are investing in the stock market, as Erin pointed out, since 2008, just due to perceived market volatility. So does the stock market matter? I mean, certainly, depending on who you are, but if you're a majority of Americans, and the economy is in free fall and you've just lost your job and you don't know how you're going to pay rent, I can see it being a little bit less important these days.
I'm David Grasso, and welcome to another edition of the Millennial Minute on Bold TV. Today's question: does the stock market matter to average Americans? You've already heard from two of our guests, Hannah Chatalas, Senior Vice President at Global Situation Room, and Erin Elmore of Turning Point USA, also a friend of Bold TV. Hey, ladies. So you were talking about this, both of you were, right? Hannah, the stock market crashes. Does that matter to the average American?
Well, I mean, this is a good question, and it's an important one, right? Because for so long, the stock market has been an indicator of, the economic forecast. Where are we going as an economy? But more and more, particularly over the past, 20 or so years, and particularly since the Great Recession, it has become, there's been more dissonance between where we see the economy and where we see the stock market. So really the question is, what is the value of the stock market, and where is it making a difference in terms of everyday Americans? And to me, the evidence points to no, but I would also love to hear Erin's thoughts on that.
Yeah, Erin, is it only when it's bad that it affects average Americans, and when it's good, they don't really see the rewards, as Hannah's suggesting?
Well, what I also think is interesting, to take a very hard left here, the headlines move the market. So if Donald Trump, our president, says something outlandish, we might see a dip. If he says something promising about prosperity in the future, we see the markets rise. And we've seen tremendous pre-COVID and even a rebound now with the positive headlines, positive moves and records in the stock market. So I think that's an interesting component as well, to look at how the news is impacting the stock market. As I said in my open, over 55% of people still do own stocks, which is greater than half. So I think there is to be something brewing with those other 45% of Americans. Where are they putting their money? Are they living in poverty? Are they people that aren't accounted for in our statistics? And that's something that we really should explore as Americans on both sides of the political aisle.
Yeah, so Hannah, when the stock market drops, it causes layoffs, right? So we can't say that the stock market's become completely untethered from the real world, has it?
No, but actually, could I address something that Erin said, because it's very interesting. So to the point of whether or not President Trump says something and it affects markets, I do have to say that that's another new historic norm change. I will go ahead and say it that way. I remember when I was in the Obama White House, we were very careful not to speak about certain things publicly because we didn't want to influence the markets, and we didn't think that was the correct move for the federal government. So it actually brings up another discussion, whether or not we want to get into it today, of where does capitalism and capital markets serve us just in general today? How does it look different? What is the conversation? What's the role of the government around that?
Yeah, Erin, it's very interesting. You were on The Apprentice with Donald Trump and have some inside information there. Do you think it's smart of him to speak so openly about the markets?
Well, I do believe it's our president's job to speak about the economy and economic prosperity of the nation. So there's no impropriety there whatsoever. I know there should be a barrier, if you will, between the Federal Reserve and the White House. And sometimes there's been communication between those two that financial experts have had some discomfort and displeasure with. But I do believe it's the job of the president to speak to the economy. And he is the first president that has been a true disruptor of markets. And he has changed and shifted the paradigm. When he speaks, the markets listen.
Yeah, but Hannah, you were saying in the Obama White House, they were so careful not to move the needle. Why this radical departure, do you think, Hannah?
Oh, here's what I will say. I think Erin covered it. Honestly, it really is just a matter of norms, and yeah, there are some rules that have now been broken, and look, to a certain extent. I mean, I'll be the first one to admit that while I understand the need for, or I understand our general desire to really be judicious around that, there are some kind of old norms in Washington that President Trump is breaking, and those are actually really interesting to see.
Wow, that's interesting, Erin. We had some breaking of norms and disruption of Washington coming from a liberal as actually something possibly positive.
Well, I think we're both seeing that this is a conversation that's more about finance than politics. So today is not going to be a bloodbath. I think it's just going to be more about the green and just figuring out if money talks and where it walks.
Yeah, so this is the interesting part, right? We all want to see more Americans own stocks, right? How can we get there? Erin, go ahead, 30 seconds.
Financial education and literacy is so important on every level. I think it's often reserved for the super wealthy and not necessarily matriculating down to different populations. And I think it's just more about education. It's very foreboding, understanding all of the different dynamics of the stock market, and people are often scared of it. That's why you see people dealing in cash or real estate. And truthfully, real estate is a bit of an antiquated form of investment because of the way that we live our lives with more transiency. So I just think it's about literature and understanding and education.
I love seeing you two get along. Hannah, I'll give you the last word here.
This is one more area where I'm going to go ahead and agree with Erin. I say this goes back to education. Truly, it really does. At the same time, we're in a very interesting time because there is more access to the stock market. I mean, you look at apps like Robinhood, et cetera, and it makes it more accessible than it ever has. But in order to use it effectively, that is where there needs to be more education, and just everyone needs to have a base understanding in financial literacy.
Well, I wish we would see more of this, liberals and conservatives talking to each other, respecting each other, no matter what the political climate is. And on that note, thank you so much for joining us today.
Namaste.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us today for this very special edition of Millennial Minute here on Bold TV. Stay tuned for many more. We'll see you next time.